everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is November the 17th, 2022. I'm Barry Stagner, and very glad to be back with you again this week. And great weekend last weekend up in Kelso, Washington. Got a chance to meet some of you and shake hands and say hello. And just had a great conference over the weekend, and then two services on Sunday at the church, Calvary Chapel Longview. And it was funny to meet some of you who said, I heard about it on the lineup and came just hearing about it 2 days earlier. So anyway, great weekend. Thank you for all who prayed. And a couple other things before we jump in. Just wanted to say thanks about those who have pre-ordered our Amir and I's new book, Bible Prophecies, The Essentials. And we have surpassed the halfway point pretty significantly to that number that we're going to need to hit in order to get on the bookshelves of stores and not just be on their online store. And this would include stores like Target and Walmart and, of course, Barnes and Noble and other booksellers. But we're really hoping to do that. So if you were thinking about it and pre-ordering the book, that would be great. And we would really appreciate it. And, and let me just say something here real quick, because it just one of those things that kind of gets stuck in your throat. A lot of comments, rude comments to Amir in particular about just being in it for the money and all that stuff. And listen, these books aren't free. They cost money to write. You put hundreds of hours into writing, and then you have to pay somebody to edit them. So it's a readable book. And then on top of that, you have to print them. Then you have to ship them. And, they cost money. And there's a point where you have to sell so many just to cover the cost of making the book. So, we have a publisher that is just great and publishes, I think, 168 books a year, all Christian books, great company, Harvest House. And we, we're really in kind of a weird place or a different place, I should say. It's not weird. But, the only means to advertise these days is social media, really, unless you want to spend a fortune on TV or something like that. But, this is how we get the word out. We're not here trying to get rich or any of those other things that people often say. And sadly, to say such things is very insulting and rude. And so, thanks to all of you who have jumped in. It's greatly appreciated. And we just want to see this thing get out there, because it is, like we do in our little shtick thing that we recorded. These are your questions. These are the things you ask, many of you, and 70 of them in number. And the book, I think, is 190 pages long, somewhere around there. But it's got detailed answers on the most pressing questions that people are asking. So you can go to Amazon, type in my name or Amir's name, and it would be greatly, greatly appreciated, because we'd really like to see this in the local Targets and Walmarts and all that stuff. I think it'd be a good thing for people to read about. And one of the reasons I say that is because there's so much nonsense out there. There's so much sensationalism. You know what? What the world doesn't need to read is that the vaccine is the mark of the beast, or this or that about things that are just, outlandish and just make us look like a bunch of kooks. These are biblical answers to prophecy questions, and no speculation or sensationalizing. It's just, what does the Word of God have to say about each of these questions? So, again, thank you to those who have pre-ordered, and like I said, we're well over the midpoint, but we've got a ways to go. We need another 4,300, something like that, in order to hit that number. So any participation on your part would be greatly appreciated. And secondly, next week is Thanksgiving. The lineup lands on Thursday, so we'll be off next week. So I hope you all have a very blessed Thanksgiving. And make sure you spend some time actually doing that. I know it's easy for the week to get, just so pressed and time so busy that, all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, we ought to thank the Lord for his many blessings. And let me just share something we do at the church. For years, it's just been a wonderful, wonderful thing we do at the church. And you're welcome, if you're in the area, to stop by. And the sanctuary on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving is open from 6 to 9 p.m. And we have just live worship there, just like a guitar, a keyboard player, and a single vocalist. And the lights are low, and we call it family communion. And families come in and have communion. Some people stay 5 minutes, some stay a half hour. And it's just you having a time of fellowship with the Lord and giving thanks for the many many blessings we have. And, I think this is always a good opportunity, especially for fathers and husbands, to come in and kind of do the priest of the home type of thing and lead your family in communion, especially if you have kids. That's a great thing for them to see. Because, one of the most common things that women say in counseling is, my husband's not the spiritual leader. Well, this is a way to be that and to lead. And so just want to encourage you in that. But again, no program next week. Well, it's been a busy week in the news, as they all are anymore. And our first story comes from Bloomberg, actually. And the headline reads, Aramco warns world spare oil supplies are falling rapidly. The Saudi Aramco company said oil output capacity across the world is dropping quickly, and companies need to invest in more production. It's a huge concern, Chief Executive Officer Amin Nasser said in an interview in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia's capital. The spare capacity is shrinking. His comments come with the crude prices having soared 70% this year to around $85 a barrel. And many major consumers, including the US, Japan, and India, have called on producers to pump more. Surplus capacity will fall further as the coronavirus pandemic eases and more people fly, Nasser said. And if there's an aviation pickup next year, that spare capacity will be depleted. It's now getting to a situation where there's limited supply. Whatever is left that's spare is declining rapidly. Several oil and gas traders have criticized governments and climate activists for calling on companies to stop investing in fossil fuels, saying that that will cause shortages of energy in the coming decade. And Aramco, the world's biggest oil company, is one of the few major firms putting money into new production. It's spending billions of dollars to raise its daily capacity to 13 million barrels from 12 million and expects the project to be complete by 2027. And we're going to string a couple of stories here and then make an observation in a moment. The next story comes from the Jerusalem Post, and the headline reads, Israel energy companies sign companion agreement to Lebanon border. Israel and two European energy companies signed an agreement on how to calculate Jerusalem's share of income from the Kana Sidon natural gas field on Monday, a companion to the maritime boundary deal between Israel and Lebanon finalized last month. The agreement will allow Lebanon, through its licensees, French energy company Total Energies and Italian Eni, to develop the Kana reservoir and extract natural gas that there may be there. The gas field was in the area of the Mediterranean Sea, that Israel and Lebanon claimed as their own. Israel conceded the entire disputed zone, but since part of Kana is still in its economic zone, it will receive about 17% of the value of the field once Total has done a thorough survey of how much gas is in the reservoir, which is expected to take just over a year. If the energy companies find gas, they will build an economic plan for developing the reservoir, after which they will sign a more detailed agreement with Jerusalem. And the agreement ensured Israel's economic rights in the potential reservoir between the two countries, Energy Minister Director General Lior Shilat said. The agreement in principle that we signed and the detailed agreement that will come later, if natural gas is found in the reservoir, will allow cross-border development between Israel and an enemy state, a unique event in the international energy market, according to the director. And one more story, and then we'll pause for a moment. And I'm sure most of us have heard it. It comes from the Times of Israel. Israeli billionaire's oil tanker hit by bomb-carrying drone off Oman. Iran is blamed. An oil tanker associated with an Israeli billionaire has been struck by a bomb-carrying drone off the coast of Oman amid heightened tensions with Iran, officials said on Wednesday. The attack on the Liberian-flagged oil tanker Pacific Zircon happened Tuesday night off the coast of Oman, a Middle East-based defense official told the AP. The official spoke on the condition of anonymity, as they did not have authorization to discuss the attack publicly, and while no one immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, suspicion immediately fell on Iran. And General Eric Kurilla, the head of the U.S. Central Command, told the Wall Street Journal that Iran was behind the attack flat out. The unmanned aerial vehicle against a civilian vessel in this critical maritime strait demonstrates once again the destabilizing nature of the Iranian malign activity in the region, General Kurilla said. An Israeli official who spoke to the AP, again on condition of anonymity, um, said that it appeared that Iran carried out the attack with a Shahed 136 exploding drone, and Iran has supplied those drones to Russia, which has been using them to target infrastructure and civilian targets in Ukraine. Now, here's where I wanted to pause and mention something about these particular stories. And we know that in the tribulation period, there are immediately going to be rampant shortages and just runaway inflation, as we see under the riders of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The first rider being the good guy, supposedly on a white horse, coming in onto the world scene with covenant in hand. And he makes a peace agreement that satisfies the Middle East and brings a temporary peace there. And then we know immediately after that, trouble starts, and we see that there is a rise in prices, runaway inflation. A loaf of bread basically is going to cost a day's pay. Then you see, people butchering each other under the rider of the third horse, and then finally, just out and out anarchy and murder all over the world. The beasts of the earth then turn on humans and begin to compete for the food supply. Now, we know all these things are happening, and now we're hearing about some of the tensions over energy related products, which we know is going to be a centerpiece in the Ezekiel war invasion. And the fact is, over the past few years, we've been talking about the fact that the combatants in the Ezekiel war have taken center stage in the news. We have many of them, three of them in particular, on the northern border of Israel. And we don't know who all is going to participate, because there is a mention in Ezekiel 38:8 that many nations are with Togarma. Many nations are with you, is what the passage says. So, or many people, I'm sorry, are with you. So it doesn't have to be limited to the named nations of Russia, Turkey, Iran, Sudan, and Libya. Many other people are going to be involved. And we have to remember Lebanon is on the northern border of Israel. But the interesting thing that I think we find with these particular stories is that we're not really talking about the nations that are going to be involved and the amazing aspect of that the prophecy is being fulfilled and the players are on the northern border of Israel. The interesting thing about this particular element of it is that the cause of the war is now taking center stage, and that is energy-related product shortages. And, Israel now coming into a place where it's beginning to find natural resources within its own boundaries or international or their own waters within their own boundaries that extend out into the sea. We found the natural gas field, or they found the natural gas field off of Haifa, some 3 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Some of that is making its way via Egypt into the European markets where Russia and others cannot stand to have any competition. And now here we've got, this same situation brewing, and the energy related product shortage that Saudi Arabia is talking about, Aramco is talking about. Combine that with all the other things that are going to take place in the not too distant future, I believe. And you've got the very possible lighting of the fuse to the Middle East powder keg that causes these nations to invade Israel. Because once again, as we mentioned, they just can't. Russia and Turkey and all these other nations that are dependent upon the European markets to bolster their own economies cannot afford to have Israel making significant inroads. And, who knows? There's been a lot of talk inside Israel that this agreement with Lebanon was a slap in the face to the Israeli people, because they never should have made it, because, Lebanon's home to Hezbollah. Hezbollah has over 100,000 missiles pointed at, as they claim, every city in Israel. They are the enemies, even as the article said. But now, the previous administration has made, in Israel, has made an agreement with an adversary and even given up their territorial rights to this for a settlement, basically, of a percentage of what's going to be mined out of the ground, so to speak, or out of the ocean, so to speak, in the form of natural gas. So, now you've got the issue taking center stage, as I said, about what the cause of the Ezekiel war is going to be fought over. Remember, the protesting nations, which is Saudi Arabia and the Arab Gulf states, in the Ezekiel war scenario, ask the question, what are you doing when these nations invade? Have you come to take plunder? Have you come to take booty? And that, obviously is related to an economic motivation. And, you've got these countries that are just in dire straits. The Turkish lira has just basically crashed and almost become worthless. We've heard about the economic woes in Lebanon, where they've just had major, major economic collapse. Russia's having financial issues, and they've had some good influx from some of the increased gas prices that we read a moment ago. With a barrel of oil making its way up to $85 from down around the $30 mark, and these have been positives, but they are spending a lot of money in Ukraine, and it's going on a lot longer than they expected. And again, their 60% of their gross domestic product comes from energy-related products, so they can't afford to have this type of product making its way into the European market. So who knows? It's just amazing to see all these things happening, and how close we potentially are. And I believe we are close. I believe the Lord could come and snatch the church off the surface of the earth at any moment. And then all these other things I believe that we could say with some assurance that it seems like there's a necessary break between the rapture of the church and the start of the tribulation. I don't think the rapture indicates the tribulation has begun. I think there's going to be a time period where the world is in such chaos that this man is going to come along, and he is going to, be the man with a plan. And he will deceive the nations through intrigue. And that word intrigue in Daniel 11 means smooth speech or flattery. And so he'll be a smooth talking flatterer, a silver tongue, as the old adage goes. And the whole world is going to follow after and worship him. Now, the Associated Press is reporting that Turkey alleges U.S. complicity in deadly Istanbul bombing and rejects the condolence statement. Turkey's interior minister accused the U.S. of being complicit in a recent bombing in the city of Istanbul on Sunday that left at least 6 people dead and dozens others injured. Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu rejected a statement of condolence from the U.S. during a press conference near the scene of the attack after authorities arrested a Syrian woman with suspected ties to Kurdish militants. I emphasize once again that we do not accept and reject the condolences of the U.S. enemy, Soylu said, according to Turkish state media publication Anadolu Agency. The Interior Minister said the U.S. statement of condolence was like a killer being the first to show up at a crime scene. The U.S. Embassy in Turkey tweeted Sunday that it was deeply saddened by the explosion, adding, "We extend our deepest condolences to the families of those who lost their lives and wish for a speedy recovery for the injured." And of course, the reason that they're accusing us accusing the U.S. of this, is because of our support for the Kurdish people. And again, the Kurdish militants are viewed as terrorists by Turkey, and the U.S. has been supportive of them. And so again, this puts the blood on our hands and their minds. And, tensions around the world, especially surrounding these nations that are going to invade Israel, are increasing. And another tragic story coming out of Iran. The BBC reports Iran hands out more death sentences to anti-government protesters. 4 people have been sentenced to death on the charge of enmity against God in connection with the recent anti-government protests in Iran. Revolutionary courts in Tehran said one of the unnamed rioters hit and killed a policeman with his car, the judiciary's Mizan news agency said. The second possessed a knife and a gun, and the third blocked traffic and caused terror, it alleged. The fourth was convicted of a knife attack, Mizan reported late on Wednesday. Human rights activists condemned the death sentences, which brought the total of 5 since Sunday, saying that they were the results of unfair trials. Protesters don't have access to lawyers in the interrogation phase. They are subjected to physical and mental torture. Human rights activists condemned the death sentences, which brought the total of 5 since Sunday, saying they were the results of unfair trials. Protesters don't have access to lawyers in the interrogation phase. They are subjected to physical and mental torture to give false confessions and sentenced based on those confessions. The director of Norway based Iran Human Rights, Mahmoud Amory Mogabedan, told the Associated French Press news agency. Although the judiciary did not disclose the identities of the 5 individuals sentenced to death, Amnesty International said information about their charges had led human rights activists to believe they were a group of very long names, Iranian names, and it added that they were among at least 21 detainees charged with security related offenses that are punishable by death under Iran's Sharia based legal system, including enmity against God and corruption on earth. Boy, isn't that an interesting charge based on who's making it? And again, so we see this unrest that is happening within this country. And I think this would fall under the category not of wars and rumors of wars or nation or kingdom against kingdom, but this would be a nation against nation and ideological warfare within the country. And that, the word ethnos can certainly apply to those things, not just, ethnic tensions. And Reuters is reporting a Russian colonel who helped Putin's mobilization mysteriously shot dead. A colonel serving as the deputy head of one of the Russian Navy's top colleges has been found dead in mysterious circumstances, according to reports. Vadim Boyko is said to have been responsible for working with troops recently called up under Vladimir Putin's partial mobilization order for the war against Ukraine. He reportedly showed up to work early Wednesday at the Makarov Pacific Higher Naval School in Vladivostok, and then was found with at least one gunshot wound. Several local media reports were quick to deem his death a suicide, with the Far Eastern Gazette reporting that he fired a bullet in his temple. The news outlet said Boyko's suicide had been confirmed with sources within the Pacific Fleet via a local TV station. His death comes just 1 month after a military commissar for the Primorsky region was found dead, with local authorities claiming that his heart had stopped. Well, that's what happens when somebody kills you. And so, again, we see some tensions inside of Russia. And these stories are all pointing in a direction we'll pause and talk about here in a couple of minutes. And the Gateway Pundit says Arizona's election must be redone. Here are at least 3 provable constitutional violations that render the results uncertifiable. If the Republican Party of Arizona and or the campaigns for Republican governor, attorney general, or secretary of state the Senate candidate conceded decide to contest the results of this midterm election, their arguments should be based solely on the constitutionally sound arguments that will prove multiple violations, damages, and disenfranchisements of Maricopa County voters that were outcome determinative. Outcome determinative means that the violations were so severe they determined the outcome of an election. Article 2, Section 21 of the Arizona Constitution states all elections shall be free and equal, and no power, civil or military, shall at any time interfere to prevent the free exercise of the right of suffrage. It's a fact that over 70 voting locations in Maricopa County had issues with ballot tabulator machines not being able to read voters' ballots. In addition, there were also reports of printers having configuration issues and even ink settings being improperly set, rendering ballots unreadable. All of these issues, whether purposeful or not, violate Article 2. And what happened on Election Day in Maricopa County, the article says, was a violation of voters' equal protection rights, their First Amendment rights, and their voting rights. And moreover, Maricopa County election officials lied to voters when they instructed them to check out and check back in at another polling station location to vote. Nowhere in the Arizona Elections Manual does it say that this is an option or a solution. In fact, once someone checks in, whether they voted or not, they can't leave to go to another polling place because it would have been considered double voting, as there is no way to determine if the voter didn't vote at 2 different polling locations. For this reason alone, this election should be annulled and redone. And if this was not bad enough, it has been revealed that the chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Bill Gates, along with Maricopa County Recorder Stephen Richer, started a political action committee on November 17th of 2021 called the Pro-Democracy Republicans of Arizona, which was designed specifically to recruit, train, and run candidates that do not question the validity of the previous election in 2020. This is a huge conflict of interest at the least and shows a clear bias against all candidates that hold an opposing view. Imagine that those tasked with conducting free and fair, non biased elections were overseeing the elections of candidates whom they publicly disapproved of and actively sought to defeat. Now, here's another story from the DW in Germany. Berlin state elections declared void. Berlin's highest court has added new elections in the German capital, declaring that the chaos in the 2021 vote violated election law. The Berlin mayor faces a neck and neck race to keep her office. Germany's constitutional court ruled on Wednesday that the state of Berlin would have to rerun its elections next year after deciding that the organizational chaos reported at hundreds of polling stations around the city made the vote invalid. The Berlin election will now have to be repeated within 90 days. Presiding Judge Ludgera Selting said the decision had to be taken because of the frequency and gravity of the mistakes that had been made, which were so widespread that they may have altered the election's results. Selting also spoke of serious systemic flaws in the preparation of the election. Now, the Gateway Pundit says I almost combined million and Brazilian. Over 3 million Brazilians protest election fraud. Bolsonaro to annul the steal. Since a massive fraud during the runoff election on October 30th in Brazil, millions of Brazilians have been protesting on the streets every day against electoral fraud by communist convicted criminal Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. On yesterday's Day of Republic, millions took to the streets again, especially in Rio de Janeiro and the capital Brasilia, but also in smaller towns across the country. Mainstream media such as O Globo refuse to report on what may be the largest protest the world has ever seen, fueling even more rage and disappointment among the Brazilian people. I'm no expert on the history of protests, but I think these may be the biggest protests the world has ever seen, Brazil expert Fernando Teles told German website Free World. People are very angry, and that's really not like the Brazilians at all. They are usually pretty laid back. According to Teles, over 3 million people demonstrated yesterday in Brasilia. Although the capital is very difficult to reach and the people often had to travel several days to get there. In Rio de Janeiro, approximately 500,000 protested in front of the old Ministry of Defense, demanding military intervention to prevent the communists from taking power. Now, we're almost there. Stick with me. The Gateway Pundit also reports that stopping the steal, 500,000 Mexicans protest eliminating voter ID and election safeguards. Up to 500,000 Mexicans were out in the streets Sunday in 15 cities to protest far-left President López Obrador's plan to eliminate the National Electoral Institute and state-based electoral authorities and possibly such safeguards as voter ID. Did you catch that? Mexico has voter ID. Protests were held in Mexico City, Monterrey, Guadalajara, Morelia, Querétaro, Calucan, and Cancun, Mexico New Daily reports. According to a poll in Reforma newspaper, Mexicans are afraid that President López Obrador and his leftist Morena party will want to dismantle the National Electoral Institute in order to appropriate the new institute to control elections. In a video message posted to social media after Sunday's protest, INE President Lorenzo Cordova noted that hundreds of thousands of people came out to defend our democracy and our electoral system in the face of the risk of anti-democratic regression. Cordova says, we cannot allow it. Now, here's an interesting element I think that we need to draw our attention to regarding these stories. You know, it's clear that in the last days when at the time, Isaiah 2 says, at the time when the Lord shakes the earth, that he will give them incompetent leaders, children as princes, as a phrase used there. That's obviously figurative. It doesn't mean there will actually be children ruling us. And although you could make a case, at least partially, for that, with the fact that children are being allowed to make decisions about who and what they are that deny biology and their chromosomal arrangement. But the as rulers and leaders, the indication is that there will be an or unqualified and incompetent leaders around the world, and I think this feeds into very clearly the attitude that is going to allow the Antichrist to rise to power. Think about how many stories we just read, and there were others, but for the sake of time, I didn't cover them. But there were stories about this unrest. Here we talk about it in Iran. Iran's sick of their leadership. A good portion of the people in the United States are sick of their leadership. Mexico, sick of their leadership. Germany, the crooked way that an election was held, is causing people to be sick of their leadership. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And if you think about it, when hopefully hundreds of millions of people disappear and are taken to heaven in a moment and a twinkling of an eye to live in the Father's house with the Lord until we come back with Him 7 years later, 7+ years later. And somebody's going to need to step up. And, it won't be an elected official. It will be one who rises to power. He won't be given the role of authority, recognized as a royal. He won't be a king. He won't be a political leader. He will rise up from obscurity, is what the Bible tells us. And this one is going to come forward and say, you know what, enough of the politics, enough of all this nonsense, enough of all this crookedness. Let's just all unite under one person. I'll be that person. And here I've got a covenant, solve the Middle East crisis, let the Jews build their temple on the Temple Mount. All is good, life is good, and the world's going to sign up for it. And part of that mentality is because of what we're reading here, that people are just getting sick and tired of crooked leadership, and rightfully so. We should be tired of it. And it's just happening all over the world. And these are the tensions that are non-war related that are going to increase in the last days as well, as people begin to turn on those who have basically, many of them, like the Antichrist is going to do, seize the kingdom through inappropriate means. And the Antichrist will be just of that nature. So, here we've got a world that is getting sick and tired of lying leadership and crooked leadership and leadership that's basically, as the old saying goes, greasing their own palms, using their position through lobbyists and others to gain a fortune. Then, it is interesting where we've got, published incomes of people in places of power here in the United States. And, a lot of names come to mind. I won't go down that list, but there's plenty of them who mysteriously became millionaires while holding a political office that pays $150,000 or thereabouts. So I don't know how you become a millionaire off of that kind of salary. That's in these days, that's just enough to get by for a family. Now, interesting as we see lawlessness abounding in the last days, Newsmax reports that Target attributes $400 million loss to, listen to this, organized retail crime. Target revealed to reporters on Wednesday earnings call that organized retail crime is responsible for a $400 million reduction in gross profit this year compared to 2021, Yahoo Finance reported. Target Chief Financial Officer Michael Fidelic stressed that theft was a critical driver on the retail company's profit losses, and it has only worsened over the last 12 to 18 months as crime continues to skyrocket across U.S. cities. We expect it will reduce our gross margin by more than $600 million for the full year, Fidelki said. There we go, Fidelki. Adding that Target is taking action, to help curb that trend as it becomes an increasing headwind on the business. The phenomenon is nowhere near exclusive to just Target. The National Retail Federation reported from September showing 2021's average inventory shrinkage rate was 1.44%. That's in line with the 1.5% average decline over the past 5 years. And most of the retailers surveyed report in-store e-commerce and omnichannel fraud are all on the rise. And the majority of respondents also reported that the guest unassociated violence, external theft, organized retail crime, and cyber crimes have become higher priorities for their organizations. Excuse me, challenges within labor shortages, employee retention and hiring, as well as issues related to masking and maintaining COVID precautions, have contributed to the risk of violence and hostility. And the numbers which suggest retail crime hasn't risen substantially have been challenged by retailers in some of America's biggest cities who argue the problem is out of control, according to the Mercury News. There was a story earlier in the year, maybe even at the end of 2021, where there was a line of cars, 25 cars long, ready to grab those who were doing a smash and grab or just a grab inside of Nordstrom stores around the state of California. People were waiting outside and nobody did anything. Why? Because the governor of California has said we're not going to prosecute anybody that steals items less than a value of $900. So you can walk in anywhere. Look at some of the videos that are on social media where somebody just walks into Home Depot or walks into a retail outlet or walks into a drugstore or walks into Target and just walks right out the front door with security people watching them go. Why? Because they can't be arrested here in California if it's under $900. And it's just insane. Lawlessness is abounding, and Christian Jesus is coming soon. Keep your head up. Keep your eyes focused on him. We're going to make it all the way through to the end. The Bible promises he who endures to the end will be saved. And the word saved in that particular context means delivered. We're going to be delivered from this world in a moment and a twinkling of an eye. And I don't know about you, but that's sounding better and better every day. And you know what? We're going to a place where you can't get a cold. That's good news. There's no death, sorrow, sighing. All those former things are going to pass away. Now, in line with our previous story, CNBC reports that UK inflation hits 41-year high of 11.1% as food and energy prices tying back to what we talked about earlier, continue to soar. Economists polled by Reuters had projected an annual increase in consumer price index of 10.7%, and October's print marks an increase from the 40-year high of 10.1 seen in September. Indicative modeled consumer price inflation estimates that the CPI rate would have last been higher in October of 1981, where the estimate for the annual inflation rate was 11.2%. And UK inflation jumped to a 41-year high of 11.1 in October, exceeding expectations as food, transport, and energy prices continued to squeeze households and businesses. And, I've long thought about this here in the States, and I'm sure in other parts around the world, when the Great Depression hit and the world basically collapsed economically and jobs were scarce and food lines were long. If you look at some of the pictures from here in the States, the soup lines in the United States, you'll see people in their coats and hats and many times their ties, standing, waiting for their turn to get a bowl of soup and a piece of bread, very quietly and somberly. And, people always out looking for jobs. Well, we don't live in that kind of society anymore. We live in a society where lawlessness abounds. And listen, when food shortages get to the degree and job shortages get to the degree that they did, like in the Depression era, it would not be long lines of nice, kind people waiting for their turn to get a bowl of soup and a piece of bread. It will be people taking it and robbing and stealing and doing all the things that we see that are already rampant in our day, because there's this mentality, all in all aspects of life, seemingly all around the world, of this, nobody has a right to have more than me type of thing. It's called egalitarianism, and it's just equal in all things. Everybody has to have the same thing. Nobody can have any more than anybody else. And if you've got it and I don't, I can take it from you, and that's my right. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. And we also have another kind of ominous precursor to the things that are going to happen during the tribulation period, which I believe with all my heart is not too far off. And listen, we have to remember there's only one way to escape the Great Tribulation, and that's to take the Great Escape. And the Great Escape can only happen through being born again. Only those who are born again are going to experience that moment, twinkling of an eye experience where Jesus comes and the dead in Christ rise first, and then we meet him in the air and are forever with the Lord, which means we'll come back with him at the end of the tribulation. We'll rule with him during the millennium, and we'll stand by him at the end of all time, where he, judges at the great white throne and judges in righteousness, and eternal destinies at that point have all been sealed after death. And nobody can change teams once you die. It's appointed unto man once to die, and after this, the judgment. CNBC also reports that household debt soars at a fastest pace in 15 years as credit card use surges, the Fed report says. Households increased debt at the fastest pace in 15 years due to hefty increases in credit card usage and mortgage balances. The credit card balance collectively rose more than 15% from the same time period in 2021, the largest annual jump in more than 20 years, according to the New York Fed. The increase stems from a combination of robust consumer demand and higher prices, a Fed official stated. Households increased debt during the third quarter at the fastest pace due to hefty increases in mortgage balances. This article basically repeated the same thing. I'm sorry. Total debt jumped by $351 billion for the July to September period, the largest nominal quarterly increase since 2007, bringing the collective household IOU in the U.S. to a fresh record $16.5 trillion. Americans are $16.5 trillion in debt. That's an increase of 2.2% from the previous quarter and 8.3% from a year ago. And, this is no big surprise. And, the hard part about this is how do you dig out of this afterwards? Here you've got this situation where prices are just astronomical. Food budgets are being dug into by filling up the gas tank. Gas prices are still unbelievably high, even though they've come down some. Here in California, still paying well over $5 a gallon, $5.60, $5.70 a gallon. And, that's a long cry from the $2.30, $2.40 that we had prior to this current administration. And you know what? That's gouging down into people's monthly budgets, and they're putting basic necessities of life on credit cards. And again, this is just disastrous to see, not just a segment of society, but everybody other than the one percenters are experiencing these types of things. And I just read an article earlier today. I just kind of glanced through it. It wasn't anything prophetic, but the headline is that single-digit millionaires, meaning people with less than $10 million, are the new middle class. Well, then that makes the rest of us in the lower class or the poverty class. But there are just, again, these divisions between the masses that are just getting higher and higher, while many people are putting on their credit cards basic life necessities, food and clothes for the kids. Prices keep rising. They've got the other side of the coin where people are saying we can't be drilling for oil. We can't be, tapping these natural resources. We have to save the world, save the environment, and all these other things. And we've just got the convergence of issues and really the perfect storm that's just ready to explode and on all these levels. And this is absolutely the perfect time for one guy to stand up and say, I've got the answers. Well, he can't do that until we're out of here. So that's good news today. Now, this story comes from a website called Wired, and it's very interesting. And I just thought I'd throw it in because we see so many efforts today for man to replace God or to do the things, at least in their mind. They've already redefined marriage. They're redefining gender. They're just basically pushing God out of the picture, so to speak. Well, our God can't be pushed around, and he's getting ready to push back. There's no question about that. But this is an interesting story. The headline says a lab-grown meat startup gets the FDA's stamp of approval. Cultivated meat has been greenlit in the United States for the first time. The decision by the Food and Drug Administration means that a company called Upside Foods will soon be able to sell chicken made from real animal cells grown in bioreactors instead of requiring the slaughter of live chickens. A positive response from the FDA has long been seen as the next major milestone for the cultivated meat industry. In the past few years, startups in the space have built small scale production facilities and raised billions of dollars in venture capital funding, but haven't been able to sell their products to the public up until now. The small number of people invited to try cultivated meat have had to sign waivers acknowledging that the products are still experimental. There are two smaller regulatory steps remaining until cultivated meat can be made available to the public. Upsides production facilities still require a grant of inspection from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the food itself will need a market inspection before it can enter the U.S. market. And these two steps are likely to be completed much more quickly than the long FDA pre-market consultation process that resulted in the approval. So we don't want to be killing chickens. So we're going to grow the meat in a lab, basically. Well, that's kind of scary, I think, because who knows what they can put in it. And we all know all these things that people have been worried about. All those conspiracy people, and so many of them now becoming true and are being revealed as true. And I don't know that I'd want to eat chicken that was basically grown in a lab and under these circumstances. And it is a sensitive issue. I understand that a lot of people go vegan because they don't like animal cruelty and all that. But the Lord gave us these things to eat. He told Peter, kill and eat. And, it may be an ugly thing and you may be against it and all that, but it's not a sin to eat chicken and it's not a sin to eat steak. It's none of those things. And, that it might be a brutal thing, but in the next world, things are going to return, or in the new world, I should say, not the new world order, but the new heaven and the new earth, things will be as God had intended. And will we all be vegetarian? I don't know. I think we're going to be eating from the tree of life. That's for sure. And hopefully there'll be a hamburger tree or a hamburger fruit and pizza fruit and all that. Who knows? But we do know we will live in absolute genetic perfection forever and ever and ever. Somebody say amen. Now, let's close with a positive story, even though it's viewed negatively by much of the press. It comes from Christian Headlines, and the new channel, Great American Family, won't feature LGBT couples, according to Candace Cameron. Boy, I'm having a tough day. I'm sorry. My nose is bugging me and trying not to sneeze and cough and all this stuff. So please pardon me today, and thank you for being patient. Candace Cameron, and I've never heard, I think her name is Bure or Boer. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but she's Kirk Cameron's sister. I know that much. Actress Candace Cameron Bure says in a new interview that she doesn't expect her new network, Great American Family, to follow Hallmark's lead in featuring same-sex couples. The Wall Street Journal asked if Great American Family would include LGBT couples as plot leads, but Bure said it would not. I think that Great American Family will keep traditional marriage at the core. Bure's comments come as Hallmark prepares to break new ground with its first ever movie featuring a same-sex storyline as the focus of the plot. The movie, The Holiday Sitter, will air on Hallmark on December 11th and tell the story of two men who fall in love. Great American Family, which launched last year as a Hallmark rival, is featuring 18 original Christmas movies this holiday season as part of its annual Great American Christmas event. One of those films, A Christmas Present, featured Bure and actor Mark Blucas. Great American Family has embraced the faith community, Bure said. A song by Christian singer Matthew West titled Come Home for Christmas is the theme song for the Great American Christmas event. And my heart wants to tell stories that have more meaning and purpose and depth behind them, Bure, an outspoken Christian, told the Wall Street Journal. Excuse me, I knew the people behind Great American Family were Christians that loved the Lord and wanted to promote faith programming and good family entertainment. Well, that is a bit of good news, but she's been taking some heat for these comments. And here's the problem with people who have a problem with stations like that and not wanting to feature LGBT couples and all of that is, what? We have the right here in the United States of America to believe and openly practice our religious beliefs. And, basically it's not against us, it's against God. And God has stated, there are certain things that I do not view as allowable and have prohibited them. And who are we to argue with him? And yet many people do today. And, I've said this many times in church, and I'll say it here as we wrap the program up, we don't hate the LGBT community. And we believe that Christ died for them as well. But what we do believe is that they don't get a free pass for something that God has forbidden because the rest of us didn't. We don't get a free pass. We're told not to lie, cheat, and steal, let the thief stop stealing, and all the other things the Bible tells us to do. And the Bible has forbidden same sex relationships. And they don't get a free pass on that, just like the liar doesn't get a free pass. The gossip doesn't get a free pass. The murderer doesn't get a free pass. If God forbade it, then we shouldn't do it. And that's the end of that. And it doesn't make us hate anybody. It doesn't, and this whole phobic thing, phobic is a word for fear in the Greek, and it can even mean terror, or phobos is the Greek term. And I'm not afraid of them. I'm afraid for them. And they need to come to Jesus. And I don't hate them. As a matter of fact, we lived next door to a lesbian couple for 17 years. We had a wonderful relationship with them. And I'll tell you one thing that they knew, even though they were very put off by my job. They've asked one evening what I did for a living. And I told them, and I thought they were going to fall off the porch. But I'll tell you one thing I know for sure, and that is they knew we loved them. They knew we cared about them, even though I disagreed with their lifestyle. Didn't mean I was a hater. I wasn't a bigot. I believe the Bible, and we have every right to. So kudos to Candace Cameron, whatever it is, Bure or Bure or Burr or whatever. But kudos for her for standing up, and she's taking some heat. So anyway, that's it for today. And again, I apologize if I seem out of sorts today. This little stupid thing I have going on just drive me nuts. And you know how it is. You get a cold, you blow your nose 1,000 times, and it starts to hurt and get raw and sneezing and coughing and all that stuff. So forgive us for the kind of cut and paste program tonight. I had a couple times some pretty nasty coughing fits that we had to cut out. But again, so blessed and thankful for meeting so many of you. And it's such an amazing thing to go. I heard the same thing in South Africa, now up in Washington State, here, wherever I have the privilege to go out and speak. It's just incredible to have so many people come up and say, I watch the lineup. Watch the lineup every week. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And again, thank you for the book purchasers. And, I think that kind of the golden rule thing applies. We're not here trying to pick anybody's pocket or anything or get rich off of selling books. That just doesn't happen unless you're selling 1 million books. But we do want to cover the cost of the books, and I think you would too. And, all those things. So anyway, enough of that. But happy Thanksgiving to you all. And I pray especially, and you might think about this, there's people where the holidays are the worst time of year because they're alone. And keep that in mind as you plan the seating arrangement at your table. Maybe you can have somebody over who's going to be spending Thanksgiving alone. It's just such a brutal, brutal time. And that's why depression and overdoses and suicide and all that go up at these types of seasons. And then you compound that with everything that's happening in the world and food prices and, it's just a difficult time to be alive for some people. And even if they love the Lord, it's still easy to get discouraged and to fight loneliness if you're all by yourself. So, we're told to do good to all, but especially in Galatians, do good to all, but especially those of the household of faith. So let's take care of one another. And, God bless you guys, and just have a great, great Thanksgiving. We're looking forward to it. And we went and got our birds early because we heard there was a possible shortage with so many of them being killed because of the H5N1 virus that is killing chickens and turkeys and all the other things we talked about on previous programs. But just looking forward to a time with family to sit back and thank the Lord for his goodness. And so I hope you do that too. We'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless.